All right, hello, I'm Dr. Williams, here to talk to you today about an upcoming dissection activity that you have for your next class period. We're going to dissect disposable cameras. So what I want to do first is use short moments to talk to you about how the recycling program for these disposable cameras work, and you can probably relate easily to the discussions that we've had about green engineering. Then we're going to actually talk about taking apart these cameras, and while you do so, you can think about how these cameras were designed with green engineering principles in mind, as well as product platform principles in mind. So what we can see here on this first slide is that what we would call a product family. The Kodak has made several different types of disposable cameras, and in your dissection you're going to realize or sort of investigate how actually different they are. How much external variety do they have compared to how much internal variety we have. In our dissection activities we have three cameras. We have the power flash, we have the standard fun saver, and we have the top of the line zoom camera. Now in class, in the upcoming class, you will have one of those three types, and you'll actually get to work with other teams as they've investigated different types of cameras, and you'll actually compare notes to see how similar or dissimilar these three different types are. But before we get into that, let's talk about what these cameras are and how they work. So Kodak is one of the leading members of that camera field, and their principles is basically to create this camera, and instead of it being completely disposable, they actually recycle a large quantity of these cameras. So by weight, almost 90% of the actual camera can be reused or recycled, which we like. And there's actually, it's called closed loop recycling. They actually start with this initial camera, you take pictures, you use the product, and then you return it to your film developer, and they actually will partially disassemble this, send it back to Kodak, and they will actually reuse a large number of the components, or actually grind the basic materials down to then reshape and remake new components. And so it's a closed loop process. So your camera that you receive has several components that have been used already. So let's talk specifically how that works. First of all, though, we want to talk about how successful this market idea has been. Over 163 million cameras have been recycled, and as you have seen in the accompanying reading, at first people didn't think that this idea would work out very well, but they've been surprised and surprised everyone in the success of the ability to have these be recycled. So again, it's a closed loop recycling program. So you start first by assembling your camera from back. But a large component of that assembly comes from a previously used camera. I think it says in your reading that several components they get to 10 cycles through and then they're stopped being used. So again, you ship that off to the retailer, you go to Walmart and you purchase your camera, and then you take the pictures and then actually get them developed. And then the developer takes the film out and the battery out and then ships it back to Kodak. And Kodak has a small incentive. It's about 5 cents per camera. They actually pay the retailer to give them an incentive to actually go through this process of collecting and shipping back recycled cameras. So what they do first is they take the camera and they actually, I'll show you on this one, the folks at Walmart or at your film developer, I'll simply just rip out one piece of the component, and you'll see when you take this apart that it actually has a notch built in just for that simple action. And the film is stored over here, and that's removed. They can then, if they so choose, can then actually take open the whole back and take the actual battery out. And then they basically ship this all back to Kodak. Let me show you on the camera that actually has film in it. So the way that these cameras typically work is they have the film here, and the film is actually not wound. This is a completed piece of film, but you'll notice that the film, when not developed, stretches across on this spindle and engages this sprocket as it's pulled through by your thumb, and we'll show that again later. Basically, as you use the camera, you're turning this thumb wheel, which is pulling the film across the wheel and back into the roll, so that it's actually already completely contained when it's shipped back to the film developer. So after your film is completely used, you return that to the photo finisher. Of course, take out the battery and film cartridge. They actually then ship Kodak, where they actually go through the reuse and recycling. Again, they have a small fee, and they actually ship those batteries off to a different industry because you have not used, with only 26 pictures taken, you have not used the full capacity of this battery, so they actually ship that off. Now, what they do, and we'll sort of go through this in class in your dissection activity, they actually remove the lenses and other pieces of plastic. It's polystyrene, plastic, and they actually will regrind. They'll grind that down and use those pellets to do new plastic injection of new parts. Okay, and so they go through and inspect the camera and make sure that those parts that are going to be reused are of quality, and if they are, they just add new film and the battery to a new enclosure, and they just basically ship out a new camera for your reuse. Okay, so let's take a look at these cameras up close. All right, so let's get down to business. So when you come to class next period, you're going to be given either a power flash, a fun saver, or a zoom camera. And it's your job to take these apart and investigate how these cameras were designed for green engineering principles as well as product platform architecture principles. Now, although these three cameras are slightly different, there's one thing that they all have in common, which is they all have a flash in them, which means they have power and a battery, which also means you run a risk of electrical shock. So first thing you have to do when you take these apart is to be very careful so as not to get shock, and we're going to show you now how to do that. So one person on your team needs to don some nice, beautiful blue gloves, as well as some safety goggles. What we're going to do is short circuit the circuit board, and there's going to be a potential for a large flash and a pop that could actually send some hot molten solder into a class and possibly into your eye. So you need to be very careful. You'll be happy to know we've not had any injuries to date. So anyhow, so let's get started. So here's our power flash. And when you dissect that, you'll notice there are 1, 2, 3, 4 tabs that you need to open. And depending upon if it's a very new camera, you're going to have to peel back the label a little bit. But they'll just open sort of like with a nice little clamshell, we hope. There we go. You just sort of peel it apart. Now, as you peel apart, be very careful. You do not want to touch the circuit board. So you want to start from the back, peel that off, and set it to the side. Now, as you get ready to remove the front casing, you just need to hold on to this, the frame, and pull it apart. Now, this is the capacitor, and you'll notice it has 2 leads that it's connected to on the circuit board. And the capacitor basically holds a charge from the battery so that it can power the flash. So what you need to do is get ready. You take a rubber-handled screwdriver and simply place it across the leads of the capacitor to short out the circuit. Now then, here we go. No flash. So that means that it was already discharged, but we still need to do that to be careful. So some of you might be considering how you want to consider it. You could be lucky or unlucky to get one that is charged, but either way, it's a lot of fun. So you just need to make sure it's safe to touch. Now, once you've done that, you can remove your glasses and your gloves and continue with your dissection. Okay? So now the circuit board is safe to touch. So one thing we want to talk about as you begin the worksheet and you investigate how this camera works, remember that the film used to be dragged across the exposure thing. That's one little hint for you. But as you take apart, you can take apart different components of the camera. Sometimes, hopefully, a bit more careful than that. But there's some little tips that we want you to remember. So first of all, you can stop at this component. You can leave this lever arm in place. There's a spring underneath that is very difficult to put back into place. We want to make sure that you keep that in place. The second component is you can twist off this lens assembly and actually take out the lens so that you can take a look at it. But we request that you sort of stop there. Technically, you could remove this little piece, this bevel system, but the problem with that is that there's another small spring that holds the shutter blade in place. And as you can see, it's really easy to fall off. And so this spring, this little copper spring, is really hard to put back on. So we ask that you don't do what I just did. And there are pictures on your worksheet that can help you with that, such that you don't need to do that. Okay. So again, as I take apart my fun saver, you can just sort of stop there. There's no need to take it apart any further. Okay. Take the zoom camera apart. You'll notice a very complex lens mechanism. And again, we do ask that you do not take that apart because again, it's very difficult to put back together. Okay. So as you progress through the exercise, think, as you're taking things apart, obviously do better than I did and take better care of your parts, but think about how are these made? What kind of decisions did Kodak make to make sure that these cameras are made as cheaply as possible? What kind of decisions did they make such that this is a good green design? And what kind of decisions did they make as you compare across all 3 different cameras? What kind of design decisions did they make to see that this was a product platform? And how did that product platform help them achieve a green design? So good luck at the next class period. Have fun, and we'll see you again.